Good morning, grade 10s. I hope you guys are well and that you're having a good week and that you're keeping safe. Yesterday we did a brief intro into functions and we also learned how to use the table method using the calculator. There was no exercise, so there is no memo to download for today, but please download the notes for the 21st and 22nd of May. We are going to be learning how to sketch the linear function or a straight line graph. Please go through your notes, read through them before you watch the video so that you have an idea as to what I am doing. This shouldn't be new to you. You did do straight line graphs in grade 9. You will see that the lesson is for the 21st and 22nd of May, which means you will have tomorrow to finish off the activity. You will see the activity is quite long, so we have given you 2 days to do it. So please quickly download the notes, go through them, and then come back to the video. Just to recap quickly, you will see the standard form of the linear function is y is equal to ax plus q. And you can see there that a is the gradient of your linear function, or like you would have seen in your notes, is the vertical stretch. And then you can see that q is the y-intercept of your linear function, or you would have seen in the notes, it is your vertical shift. Just to quickly recap, the function of a, like you saw in the previous slide, is the gradient of the linear function. It determines either how steep or how flat the graph is. So in many ways it determines the shape of the graph. If the a value is a bigger number, it means the graph will be steeper. And if the a value is a smaller number, it means the graph would be flatter. If a is positive, the graph would increase from left to right. So if you had to take a ruler and slide it across your graph from left to right, the graph would be going up. If it is a negative graph, if you had to take a ruler and shift it over your graph from left to right, the graph would be going down. It would be a negative graph. So if a is positive, it would be an increasing graph, and if a is negative, it would be a decreasing graph. And then the function of q is quite simple. So q represents your y-intercept of your linear function. You will see that q is your vertical shift. So if your q is positive, it means that your graph moves up the value of q. And if q is negative, it means that your graph moves down the value of q. So for example, if you've got a graph that says y is equal to x plus 3, it means that your graph is moving 3 spaces up. If you have a graph that says y is equal to x minus 2, it means that your graph would move 2 spaces down. So q is the vertical shift or the y-intercept of your graph. And then lastly, before we do some examples together, the steps involved in sketching a straight line graph. The first thing you need to do is make sure that the equation is written in standard form. So in standard form, meaning y is equal to ax plus q. It needs to be in that order. The second thing is you would look if a is positive or negative, which would determine if your graph is increasing or decreasing. The third thing you would check is your q positive or negative. So in other words, does your graph shift up or does it shift down? Then the fourth step, which is very important, and in grade 9 they refer to this as the dual intercept method. What you're going to do is you're going to find your intercepts for your graph. So you're firstly going to find your x-intercept, and you're going to do that by making y equal to 0. And then the second thing you're going to do is find the y-intercept, and you're going to do that by making x equal to 0. And that should leave you with 2 coordinates. Once you have your 2 coordinates, you're going to move on to step 5, which is where you are going to sketch your graph. You're going to plot your 2 coordinates. You're going to join them with a ruler, and it should give you a straight line. Once you've drawn your straight line, you're going to go back and you're going to check, is it positive or negative according to step 2? Is it in the right y-intercept according to step 3? So you're going to go back and you're going to double check that you have drawn your graph correctly. Okay, grade 10. So the first example we're going to do says sketch the graph of the linear function y minus 3x is equal to 6. So we need to go through our steps of how to draw a linear function. And the first thing that you need to remember is that your formula needs to be in standard form, which means y is equal to. So I've got y minus 3x is equal to 6. I want y on its own, so that minus 3x I want to be on this side. So it's minus 3x. To get rid of it, I would add 3x to both sides. So it's going to be y on its own is equal to, and remember the x comes first after the equal sign, so it's going to become positive 3x. And I then have a plus 6. So you can see I've rewritten this equation in standard form, in the form y is equal to ax plus q. The second thing I need to have a look at is my a value to determine is my graph going to be positive or negative, and you can see it's going to be positive, so it should be that sort of shape. The next thing you can see is that your q value is positive 6, which means that your graph, your y-intercept should be at 6. Your graph should jump up 6 spaces, so it should start about there, but I'll do that with you in a minute. And once we have seen the effect of our a and our q value, we then need to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. And remember, this is what you guys learned last year called the dual intercept method. So I'm going to start off to find y. I'm going to make x equal to 0. So in this equation, I'm going to substitute y is equal to 3x plus 6. Instead of x, I'm going to substitute with a 0. So I'm going to say y is equal to 3, 0 plus 6. And we know that 3 times 0 is 0. And 0 plus 6 is 6. So we get y is equal to 6. And we write that as a coordinate. So our coordinate, the x value was 0. And the y value is 6. So there we have our first coordinate. And now we move on to the second coordinate. So to find x, we make y equal to 0. So in my formula, y is equal to 3x plus 6. I'm going to substitute y for 0. So I'm going to say 0 is equal to 3x plus 6. And the goal now is to get x alone. So that positive 6 I'm going to get rid of by subtracting 6 from both sides. So I get negative 6 is equal to 3x. And now to get x alone, I divide both sides by 3. So I get x is equal to negative 6 divided by 3, which gives me negative 2. So my second coordinate would be the x value is negative 2 and the y value is 0. So now I have my x and my y intercept, and now I can draw my straight line. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to plot those 2 points. The first one is 0 and 6. So 0 on my x-axis and 6 on my y-axis. Now remember I told you with that value of q that it should be, one of the intercepts should be at 6, and you can see we're right there. And my second coordinate is x is negative 2 and y is 0. So it's going to be there. So I've plotted those 2 points, and then with a ruler I'm going to join them. Now you can double check the shape of your graph. Is it positive like it should be? Yes, it is. And I'm going to just label it over here. I'm going to say y minus 3x is equal to 6. And that is the label for my graph. The second example we're going to do, it says sketch the graph of the linear function 2x plus 3y plus 6 is equal to 0.
So the first step you should remember is to get this equation into standard form. Okay, so I need to have it y is equal to, so I'm going to start off by taking the 6 and the 2x to the other side of the equal sign, and I'm going to do that by subtracting it from both sides. So I get 3y is equal to, remember the x comes after the equal sign, and I'm subtracting, so it becomes minus 2x, and the positive 6 becomes minus 6. But remember, I need to get y on its own, not 3y, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3, so I've got y is equal to, I'm going to leave this negative 2 over 3 as a fraction, and then negative 6 divided by 3 gives me negative 2. Okay, so that is now in standard form. Now, once I've put it in standard form, I need to determine the shape of my graph, and you can see your a value is negative 2 over 3, which means your graph is going to be negative, so it will be something like that. And then the next thing you should see is your q value is negative 2, which means your y-intercept should be negative 2, which means if the original graph started here, this one should jump down 2 spaces and it should intersect somewhere there. Once we have determined the effects of a and q, we then do what we call the dual intercept method. So we find our x-intercept and our y-intercept. So for the first one, to find y, I'm going to make x equal to 0. And I'm going to substitute x in. So I'm going to say y is equal to negative 2 over 3. Instead of x, I'm going to put a 0 minus 2. I know that anything times 0 stays 0, so I'm going to now say that y is equal to negative 2, and if I write that as a coordinate, I get my x value is 0, my y value is negative 2. Now I'm going to move on and find x. I'm going to make y equal to 0. Y equal to 0. So I now want to find my x-intercept. So I'm going to say y is equal to negative 2 over 3 x minus 2. Instead of y, I'm going to put a 0 is equal to negative 2 over 3 x minus 2. I want x all on its own now, so that negative 2, to get rid of it, I need to add 2 to both sides. So that becomes 2 is equal to negative 2 over 3 x. And now I want x all on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2 over 3, and that you can do on your calculator. So you're going to say 2 divided by negative 2 over 3, and you'll see that you get an answer of negative 3. So we see that x is equal to negative 3, and if we write that as a coordinate, our x value is negative 3, and our y value, we substitute it as 0. So now you can see we have our 2 coordinates, and from there it's a matter of plotting them and drawing our graph. So our first coordinate is 0 on the x and negative 2 on the y, which is there. Remember, that should ring a bell with our q value, that is one of our intercepts. And the second, the x is negative 3 and the y is 0, so it sits there. So I've plotted my 2 points. I'm now going to join them using a ruler. And I'm going to double check my shape. Is it the same as the shape I determined earlier? Yes, it is. It is a negative straight line graph. And then my last step is to label it. So I'm going to say 2x plus 3y 6 is equal to 0. And there are my 2 straight line graphs.
Alright, grade 10s, like I said earlier, there is quite a bit of homework for today, but you do have got 2 days to do it. So you've got today, Thursday, and tomorrow, Friday, to get it finished. On Monday, I will put up the memo and you can mark your work, and we'll carry on with new work on Monday. So for homework today, you're going to, in your Mind Action Series textbook, exercise 4, you're going to do question 1, the left-hand column. So ACEGIKMO. Then you're going to do the whole of question 2. Then you're going to turn to page 138, exercise 5, and you're going to do the whole of question 1. For exercise 4, each of those you're going to do on a new Cartesian plane. But for exercise 5, question 1, you're going to do that on the same set of axes. So just one Cartesian plane with the 6 graphs on it. If you are stuck, please ask your teacher for help. Please communicate with us. We want to hear from you guys. So please do not be shy. Ask for help. And I will chat to you guys again on Monday. Have a lovely weekend and look after yourself.